Elias, it's time to exchange rings. Isabella's hand rested gently on the back of mine, her fingertips cool from the pearl bracelet she wore. The embroidered daisy peeking out from the cuff of her dress caught my eye, and my heart gave an inexplicable lurch. For 30 years, I had dreamed countless times of just such a daisy, stitched onto a soft, well-worn cotton sleeve, crumpled by a little girl's sweat, yet it had seen me through the longest, hungriest winter of my life, back in 1998 when snow blanketed the city. I was 7 that year. My parents had died in a car crash, and a distant relative had abandoned me on the streets of Brooklyn, New York. The Christmas Eve wind cut like a blade. I huddled beside a trash can, the cramping in my stomach robbing me of even the strength to cry. Just as I thought I would fade into the shadow beneath the street lamp, a pair of small red boots stopped in front of me. "Here, take this." The little girl's voice was like hot cocoa. She held out half a loaf of rye bread, wrapped in oil paper, printed with a logo of the corner bakery, the edges still warm from her body. As I wolfed it down, I noticed a tiny daisy stitched on her sleeve, its stitches crooked, yet brighter than the Christmas tree lights nearby. "My name's Lena," she said, squatting down. She brushed the breadcrumbs from my face with her red, cold fingers. "Mom says people who share their bread get God's blessing." She stayed with me the entire afternoon, until the setting sun dyed her hair honey-colored, and a flustered adult came to take her away. All I managed to grab was a daisy hairpin she'd dropped, its metal petals still warm from her touch. Later, I was adopted and moved to Seattle. That hairpin and the memory of that half-loaf of bread became the only light in my childhood. The groom may kiss the bride. The priest's voice pulled me back to the present. I bent down to kiss Isabella, but my gaze drifted again to Lena. She had wiped away her tears and was staring up at the angel painted on the stained glass window. Sunlight filtered through the glass onto her face, making her already pale skin almost translucent. She seemed to sense my stare, turned around, and lifted the lemonade in her hand in a silent toast. Her smile held an indescribable sense of relief. A flicker of irritation stirred in me. This woman had always looked at me like that, every time we met, as if I were some long-lost treasure she'd finally found. At the cocktail party after the ceremony, Isabella clung to my arm as we mingled with guests, the embroidered daisy on her cuff glowing clearly under the lights. I had reconnected with her 3 years earlier, at my father's funeral. When she bent down to pick up the fountain pen I'd dropped, the daisy on her sleeve had struck me like a bolt from the blue. "I stitched this when I was little," she'd said with a smile. "Mom taught me." She said daisies stand for hope. In that moment, memories had come flooding back, and I'd immediately convinced myself she was the little girl who'd given me the bread. Her name even had the same Lee sound as Lena's. Maybe I misremembered, maybe she'd changed her name. None of that mattered. What mattered was that I'd finally found her. "Elias, what are you looking at?" Isabella followed my gaze to Lena, who was standing alone on the terrace, the wind tangling her hair. "Lena doesn't look well," Isabella said, her voice laced with just the right amount of concern. "I heard she's been in the hospital a lot lately. Should we go check on her?" I hesitated, and just as I was about to step forward, Lena doubled over in a cough. She pressed a handkerchief to her mouth, her shoulders heaving violently. When she lowered the cloth, I caught a stark flash of red on the white fabric. "No need. She's probably just allergic," I said, pulling Isabella away. But an uneasy flutter had taken root in my chest. I'd heard rumors of Lena's hospital stays before. When I'd run into her at the bookstore last month, she'd been so thin she looked like a bag of bones, the dark circles under her eyes as black as ink. "You should eat more," I'd said offhandedly. She'd looked up suddenly, her eyes shining with an extraordinary light. "Do you remember? When I was little, I gave you a piece of rye bread, right here in Brooklyn." My heart skipped a beat. I'd been about to press her for more details when she laughed it off. "Just kidding. I heard about your past from my uncle. It just sounded like something I might have done as a kid." Now, I realized it had never been a joke. Her eyes, her tone, the faint hint of a daisy I'd sometimes glimpsed on her sleeve, why hadn't I thought more about it? Maybe Isabella had appeared at just the right moment, or maybe I'd been so desperate to find that little girl that I'd overlooked every flaw in the story. Isabella had never remembered the bakery's logo, or the red boots, or even what rye bread tasted like. Every time I'd brought up those details, she'd brushed them off with, "It was so long ago, I forgot." But Lena, every time I mentioned the Brooklyn winter, she could pinpoint exactly where the hot dog stand had been, could tell me the street lamp beside that trash can had a broken bulb. "Elias, Lena's leaving," my assistant's voice cut through my thoughts. I raced to the door just in time to see her climb into a taxi. She leaned against the window and waved at me. The street lamp's glow fell on her face, and I noticed how her cheekbones jutted sharply now, her once soft jawline gone rigid with gauntness. As the taxi pulled away, she pulled something from her bag and held it out the window, a daisy hairpin, its metal petals tarnished black with age, but still recognizable. "You might need this," she said, her voice so soft the wind swallowed most of the words. I reached out to take it, but the taxi lurched forward. The hairpin fell to the ground and rolled to my feet. I lay awake all night, the hairpin on my nightstand glinting like a layer of frost under the moonlight. I thought of the little girl from my childhood, her warm hands, her soft voice, her belief that sharing bread brought blessings. Had this been my blessing, then? Marrying the wrong woman? The thought sent a cold shiver through me. I got up and dug out my old adoption papers. In the emergency contact section, the name, Mr. and Mrs. Walker, stared back at me, Lena's parents. The agency that had placed me with my adoptive family had been founded by Mr. Walker. The next day, I drove to Lena's house. A nurse answered the door. "Miss Walker fainted when she got home last night. She's in the hospital now," the nurse said, her voice somber. "It's advanced stomach cancer, and it's spread. The doctors say she has at most a month left." My mind went blank. I didn't hear another word the nurse said. Those 4 words, advanced stomach cancer, hit me like a sledgehammer. I burst into the hospital room to find Lena propped up in bed, reading. Sunlight streamed through the window onto her book, her fingers as delicate and fragile as glass. "What are you doing here?" She set her book aside, her tone as calm as if we'd run into each other on the street. I placed the hairpin on her nightstand, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me? You were the one in Brooklyn, weren't you?" She was silent for a long time, her fingertips tracing the tarnished metal petals of the hairpin, then she nodded. "The day I recognized you was at your father's funeral," she said softly. "You were standing by his grave, and your back looked exactly like it did when you were little. I'd planned to tell you, but when I saw the daisy on Isabella's sleeve, I suddenly couldn't." "Why?" I grabbed her hand, it was as cold as stone. "Because I'm dying," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips, though tears glistened in her eyes. "When they diagnosed me with stomach cancer, it was already terminal. The doctors said I had at most 6 months. I didn't want to burden your life with my illness. Isabella's a good woman. She can give you a whole family, and I can't." She paused, then pulled a diary from under her pillow. "Here. Everything you want to know is in here." The diary's cover was worn thin, and the handwriting inside faded from neat to shaky. I opened it to the first page, dated December 25, 1998, "Met a little boy today. He looked so, I gave him my bread. He ate it so fast. I stitched a daisy on my sleeve, hoping he'd remember me." Every page after that was filled with her longing for me. She'd gotten into the University of Seattle because I was studying there, she'd taken a part-time job at the bookstore because I went there often, she'd made her family swear not to tell me about her hospital stays, afraid I'd worry. The last entry was dated yesterday, the handwriting jagged, "Went to his wedding today. He looked so handsome in a suit." Watching him exchange rings with Isabella, I suddenly felt at peace. I can barely hold on anymore. I hope he will always be happy. I couldn't hold back any longer. I dropped to my knees beside the bed and wept. I thought of her tears at the wedding, the look in her eyes when she'd held out the hairpin, all the times she'd wanted to say something but stopped herself. The little girl I'd spent 20 years searching for had been right beside me the whole time. The daisy I cherished in my memories had been on her sleeve all along. And the blessing I'd thought I'd found? I'd pushed her away with my own hands. When Isabella called, I told her we were done without hesitation. You knew all along she was the one from Brooklyn, didn't you? I said. I heard only silence on the other end. You stitched that daisy on purpose. You said all those things to make me mistake you for her. After hanging up, I returned to the hospital room. Lena was asleep, her breathing shallow, her eyebrows furrowed as if trapped in a bad dream. I sat beside her, holding her hand, and whispered over and over, "I'm sorry, Lena. I was wrong." When she woke up, the sky had darkened. "Elias," she said, looking at me with gentle eyes. "Don't be sad. Just being able to see you one last time before I die, that's more than enough for me." She pulled something from her coat, half a loaf of rye bread wrapped in tinfoil. "I went to that old bakery in Brooklyn yesterday, just for this. It tastes the same as it did back then." I took a bite of the bread, and tears fell onto it. It still had that slightly sour, wheaty flavor from my childhood, but now it tasted far more bitter. Lena leaned her head on my shoulder. "I've loved you since I was 7, she whispered. "I thought I'd wait until the day you recognized me. But I can't wait any longer." Her voice grew softer and softer. "If there's a next life, I'll still give you my bread. I'll still stitch you a daisy." Her head lolled to the side, her hand slipping from mine. The half loaf of bread fell onto the sheets and rolled to the floor. Isabella didn't come to Lena's funeral. I stood at the graveside in a black suit, clutching the daisy hairpin. The rain had started again, cold just like the day we'd met. The nurse handed me Lena's belongings, along with the diary and the hairpin. There was a faded cotton dress, a tiny daisy stitched crookedly on its sleeve. It was more precious to me than any jewel. After that, the people of Seattle often saw a strange man wandering the streets. He wore a black suit and carried half a loaf of rye bread, asking everyone he met, "Have you seen Lena? She has a daisy on her sleeve. She gives me bread." Some said he'd gone mad, his bride had run off, he'd lost the love of his life. But only I knew I wasn't crazy. I was just looking for my little girl, the one who'd given me warmth and hope on that snowy winter day in 1998, the one with the daisy on her sleeve. One day, I found that old bakery on the streets of Brooklyn. The owner recognized me and smiled. "You're that little boy from back then, aren't you? Miss Lena came here every year to buy rye bread. She said she was waiting for someone, waiting for him to come marry her." I stood outside the bakery, the hairpin digging into my palm. The sun shone down on me, but it could no longer warm my frozen heart. I knew I'd never wait for my Lena again. Never again would I see that little girl with the daisy on her sleeve, holding out a loaf of bread for me. Later, I buried the hairpin and the daisy dress with Lena. I went to see her every day, bringing a loaf of rye bread. I'd sit beside her grave and tell her about the weather in Seattle, about the people I'd met and the things I'd done. Just as she'd stayed with me on that street corner so long ago, I stayed with her, until time wore my memories down to dust. People said I was insane, but I thought it was perfect. In this world where it was just me and Lena, I never had to worry about mistaking one person for another, never had to feel regret, never had to bear the pain of losing her. The rain still falls in Seattle, and in the wind that carries that metallic tang, I swear I can smell the faint scent of daisies. I know it's Lena, come to see me. She must be wearing those red boots, with a daisy stitched on her sleeve, holding out half a loaf of rye bread and smiling as she says, "Elias, I found you." The days blurred together after that. I moved out of the house I'd shared with Isabella, selling most of the furniture except for the old armchair where Lena had once sat during a family dinner, her laughter mixing with the clink of dishes. I took a job at a small bookstore in downtown Seattle, the same one where I'd run into Lena months before. The owner, an elderly woman named Margaret, remembered her well. "Such a quiet girl," she'd say, wiping down the counter. "She'd always ask about you, you know. Has Elias been in lately? Did he find the book he was looking for?" Each word felt like a knife to my chest, but I didn't mind. It was a way to keep Lena close. Every Sunday, I'd take the train to Brooklyn. I'd stand outside the little bakery for hours, watching the door, half expecting to see a girl in a cotton dress with a daisy on her sleeve walk out. The owner would bring me a cup of hot cocoa, no charge, and we'd talk about Lena, how she'd come in every Christmas Eve, even as an adult, to buy a loaf of rye bread, how she'd once cried when the bakery ran out, how she'd left a letter there once, addressed to the little boy with the hungry eyes. I found that letter tucked in the back of the bakery's old cash register, its envelope yellowed with age. It was dated 2005, when Lena was 14. I still think about you, it read. I hope you're safe. I hope you're happy. I'll keep stitching daisies until I find you. I carried that letter in my pocket everywhere I went, next to the daisy hairpin. Some days, when the pain was too much, I'd sit on a bench in the park and read it over and over, until my vision blurred with tears. Children would stare at me, their parents pulling them away, but I didn't care. I was just a man, missing the girl who'd saved his life twice, once with bread, once with love. Isabella tried to contact me once, the year after Lena's death. She sent a letter, apologizing for what she'd done, saying she'd been jealous of the place Lena held in my heart, that she'd thought if she became the Daisy girl, I'd love her the same way. I didn't read the whole letter. I burned it in the fireplace, watching the paper curl and turn to ash, just like my chance to make things right with Lena. Winter came again, bringing snow to Seattle for the first time in years. I wrapped myself in Lena's old coat, the one she'd worn to my wedding, the one with the faint scent of her lavender perfume, and walked to her grave. I placed a loaf of rye bread and a bouquet of daisies on the headstone, brushing off the snow that had settled on her name. It's snowing, I said, sitting down in the cold grass. Just like the day we met. Do you remember how cold it was? Your hands were red, but you still gave me your bread. I should have found you sooner, Lena. I'm so sorry. As I spoke, a gentle wind blew, carrying the scent of daisies. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I swear I felt a warm hand brush my cheek, just like it had done all those years ago in Brooklyn. I opened my eyes, expecting to see nothing but the empty cemetery, but there, on the edge of the grave, was a single daisy petal, untouched by the snow. I picked it up, holding it tightly in my hand, and smiled. I'm here, Lena, I whispered. I'll always be here. The years passed, and my hair turned grey, but I still went to see Lena every day. I still brought her rye bread, still told her about my day. The people of Seattle stopped staring at me long ago, some even waved when they saw me walking down the street with my loaf of bread. They'd come to know the Daisy man, the one who loved too deeply to ever let go. One cold Christmas Eve, I walked to Lena's grave as usual, but this time, I felt tired, more tired than I'd ever felt before. I sat down beside her headstone, leaning against it, and closed my eyes. The last thing I thought of was that snowy day in Brooklyn, a little girl in red boots holding out half a loaf of rye bread, a sleeve adorned with a crooked daisy. I found you, I whispered, before everything went dark. When the cemetery keeper found me the next morning, I was smiling, a daisy hairpin clutched in one hand and a crumpled letter in the other. On the headstone beside mine, for I'd had it placed there years before, was a single word, Lena. And beneath our names, a simple inscription, together, at last. With bread and daisies. The wind still blows in Seattle, carrying the scent of daisies and rye bread. And if you listen closely, you might hear two voices, one soft, one rough, laughing together, just like they should have done all along.